18 for anyone, but he was also described as a man who had a problem with drink and would sometimes sleep rough on the streets of Liverpool. He was doing just that in August last year when he came across three teenagers, one 17-year-old Conor Doran, his younger brother 14-year-old Bradley Doran, and 14-year-old Simon Evans. Conor Doran turned to Simon Evans and said, "I bet you haven't got it in you to do him in." Over the next 15 minutes, two attacks took place, and the 53-year-old died from his injuries 6 days later. All three were found guilty of murder in February, and today they were sentenced. The judge described Conor Doran as the leader of the pack. He received a minimum life term of 12 years. His younger brother, Brandon Doran, received a minimum term of 6 years. The judge said that he acted as a lookout on the night of the attack. And Simon Evans received a minimum term of 8 years. Also in the dock, the brother's mother,
17-year-old,
Doran,
12-year-old,
said that she was a sad and pathetic, tragic figure, somebody who provided a false alibi for her sons. The judge also said all four of her sons are now in prison. 3 convicted of manslaughter. He said there weren't many mothers in the country who were unable to shoulder the responsibility of motherhood. The judge also went on to say that this was violence for the sake of violence and a disappointing reflection on the society that we live in today.
Ed, thank you. Ed Clark from Liverpool County. Scientists in the United States have used a donor kidney to create a new organ which, when transplanted into rats, produce urine. The team at Massachusetts General Hospital hope the technique can be developed to work with human kidneys and ultimately reduce the transplant waiting list. Here's our medical correspondent, Fergus Walsh.
This is a significant moment in the history of organ transplantation. Inside this glass jar in a Boston laboratory is a rat kidney. It's been stripped of its cells, leaving behind this white collagen scaffold that gives the organ its shape. Then the kidney was reseeded with fresh cells and finally transplanted into a living rat. It didn't work very well, but the kidney did filter the animal's blood and produce urine.
The point here is really to show a proof of principle that this technology can be used to regenerate functional kidney tissue. If you're a patient on hemodialysis, kidney function of 10 to 15% would already make you independent from hemodialysis, most likely.
Most people's kidneys are not suitable for transplant when they die, but the hope is this technique could eventually be used to rebuild them with cells from a transplant patient, and that would mean the organ would not be rejected by their body. There are currently more than 7,000 people on the transplant waiting list. Of those, more than 6,000 are waiting for a kidney.
Many people die on waiting lists, and not enough people get kidney transplants in a timely way.
If we could engineer organs from scratch, use scaffolds like decellularized or synthetic, and put the patient's own cells into those scaffolds, we could theoretically solve the whole problem of organ donation.
The same technique has been used in animal research to create lungs, here functioning in the laboratory, as well as working hearts and livers. Regenerative transplant medicine has worked with humans. 2 years ago, surgeons successfully created this synthetic windpipe, which had been seeded with the patient's own cells. This latest research with kidneys is highly promising. Several years more laboratory work is likely before patient trials will begin. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Now, quick look at the time. It's coming up to 17 minutes past 1. Our top story. A new cap on benefits has been introduced in 4 London boroughs today before being extended across England, Wales and Northern Ireland in time. And still to come, the Afghan poppies that end up as heroin on British streets, the UN says production has trebled.
And in the southwest, hundreds of seabirds washed up. We'll have the latest on the rescue operation. Calls for ponies on Bodmin Moor to be branded in future after a number are found dead. And a colourful start to the new year for the region's Thai community.
Three times as much opium was produced in the Afghan province of Helmand last year as when British troops were there in 2006. That's according to the United Nations. A report by the UN says this year's crop will be even higher. Opium is the raw material for heroin, and most of the illegal drugs for sale on Britain streets comes from Afghanistan. David Loyne reports now from the capital, Kabul.
By mid-afternoon every day, Fazl and an estimated 1 million of his fellow Afghans are lost to the world. The smoking raw opium in squalid streets like this one, alongside an open sewer in the war-ravaged streets of Kabul. Afghan opium refined into heroin destroys lives in Britain too. That was one of the reasons Tony Blair said that Britain went to war in Afghanistan in the first place and sent troops south to Helmand in 2006. But British troops seen here patrolling with Afghans by fields of opium poppies at harvest time last year have failed to stop the crop. In forecasting an increase in production this year, the UN blames corruption and insecurity, but also failure to help farmers grow other crops.
Building an alternative to Helmand's drug economy.
As I reported on the BBC last month, alternative crops like cotton have failed to find a market, and as unsold cotton piles up uselessly, farmers I met had all planted opium poppies again this year. Hamidullah said the price of cotton is so low, they have to sell it at a loss. And the drug trade has put down deep roots in Afghanistan.
We did not provide them the meaningful alternative livelihood or the meaningful substitute crops. There is no determination on the Afghan government side as well as on the international community side.
As international troops prepare to wind down combat operations in Afghanistan, they leave behind a bigger opium problem than when they started. A country of 1 million addicts, still supplier of most of the world's illegal heroin. David Loyne, BBC News, Kabul.
A full military rehearsal for Lady Thatcher's funeral has taken place in the early hours of the morning in central London. More than 700 serving members of the armed forces took part in the preparations for the ceremony on Wednesday. The officer in charge said it has gone very well. At Westminster, there are plans for Prime Minister's questions to be cancelled on the day to allow MPs to attend the funeral. Let's speak now to our political correspondent Norman Smith, who joins us from Westminster now. But there are some MPs, Norman, who don't want PMQs cancelled. Will it be?
Well, Chan, although there is agreement amongst the three main parties that Prime Minister's questions should be cancelled on Wednesday because it would clash with the funeral, it's also thought it would be inappropriate to have a party political event like this on a day of mourning. Nevertheless, the Respect MP, George Galloway, is to oppose the motion when it's put to the Commons later tonight, which means there will have to be a formal debate and vote tomorrow to scrap PMQs. Now, it will be passed. But the very fact Mr. Galloway is forcing this, I think, again underlines the way in which in some quarters the arrangements around the funeral have proved so divisive. Those arrangements are still continuing with a full dress rehearsal in the early hours of the morning with 700 service personnel lining the route along the Strand, Lady Thatcher's coffin placed on a gun carriage pulled by 6 horses from the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, taken along to St Paul's Cathedral, where it was then lifted up by 10 members from service units with close associations with the Falklands. The only thing we didn't get today, Sean, was that minute gun salute, and I suspect that was to spare many Londoners a possibly alarming early morning wake-up call.
Norman, thank you. Norman Smith, joining us there from Westminster. The court has been hearing how 4 British men discussed bombing a territorial army base in Luton. The men, aged between 21 and 30, have pleaded guilty to terror offences. This report from our Home Affairs correspondent, June Kelly.
Luton is home to these 4 convicted terrorists, and they talked of launching an attack here. Just part of their secretly recorded conversations about potential targets. The Al-Qaeda-inspired cell was led by Zahid Iqbal on the left and Mohammed Shafaraz Ahmed. Through an extremist contact in Pakistan, Iqbal arranged for others, including Ahmed, to go there for training. Ahmed, in turn, radicalized the 2 other members of the cell, Umar Arshad on the left and Syed Farhan Hussein. Today, prosecutor Max Hill QC told the court, Iqbal and Ahmed began to focus on attack planning in the UK, and he said all the evidence supported the radicalisation of the defendants and their commitment to engage in violent jihad, in the sense of violent terrorist attacks against the military and civilian population of Western states, such as the United Kingdom. But as the men moved around, they were unaware they were being monitored. Bugs were planted in their cars in a joint surveillance operation by Scotland Yard and the security service MI5. The suspects talked of simultaneous attacks at multiple sites. As for specific locations, they had identified a potential target in their own town, the Territorial Army Centre in Luton. The conversation focused on the fact that under the gate here there was a small gap, and the men talked about attacking the base by strapping a device to a remote control model car and then sending it under the gate. When it came to putting together a device, they turned to the internet for instructions. They had all downloaded large amounts of extremist material, including this magazine produced by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, detailing how to make a bomb at home. 12 months ago, the authorities moved in on the Luton cell with arrests and charges. In the Berry Park area of the town, one of the key figures, Zahid Iqbal, was known as a radical. He used to come to the mosque here.
Zahid Iqbal attended our mosque several years ago. He would attend our lectures and our sermons. At the same time, he became quite politicised, and he was frustrated with the lack of what he perceived as a radical stance that our mosque should be taking. Due to this, he left our mosque.
He and the others have pleaded guilty to terrorism charges. Today, for the first time, the court is hearing the full case against them. June Kelly, BBC News at Woolwich Crown Court.
In Venezuela, the chosen successor of Hugo Chavez has narrowly won the presidential election. The socialist leader Nicolas Maduro claimed victory by a margin of less than 2 percentage points. His rival, Enrique Capriles, has demanded a recount. Our World Affairs correspondent Emily Buchanan reports.
It had been a long wait, but at last the news these government supporters had been waiting for. Victory for their candidate, hand-picked by their icon, the former President Hugo Chavez. Nicolas Maduro won just over half the votes, a narrower margin than his predecessor enjoyed, but for him it was enough. He proclaimed if 7.5 million Venezuelans said that Nicolas Maduro should be the president of the republic until 2019, this must be respected. That's democracy and the power of the majority. For the former bus driver, it's proof people want the Chavez revolution kept alive, a revolution based on using oil revenues to fund grants for the poor. This supporter said, Maduro is with the poor people and we will stay with him. But many in the opposition are crying foul. They're upset and angry. With a wafer-thin margin separating them from victory, they're disputing the Electoral Council's findings, listing many voting irregularities. The opposition candidate, Enrique Capriles, buoyed up by a better result than expected, is calling for an audit. He said, we're not going to recognise any results until each vote is counted. I say to the government candidate, you're the one who's defeated, you and what you represent. It was always going to be a tough battle once the charismatic Hugo Chavez had gone, but this election has revealed the depth of Venezuela's political divisions. Emily Buchanan, BBC News.
Adam Scott has become the first Australian golfer to win the Masters. He beat the Argentine player Angel Cabrera in a playoff. Our sports correspondent Andy Swift was watching the action.
Here we go. This to win.
It was the moment Adam Scott and an entire nation had been waiting for.
There it is. There it is.
Cue euphoria and relief. After a thrilling playoff, at last Scott had his first major title and Australia had its first Masters champion.
We're a proud sporting country and this was one thing in golf that we hadn't been able to achieve, so it's amazing that it's my destiny to be the first Aussie to win. Just incredible.
The playoff had followed some extraordinary drama on the final hole.
Oh, you little beauty!
First, Scott struck in stunning style to take the outright lead. Only one man could now deny him, Angel Cabrera, but he also had to birdie to force a playoff, and guess what? he did precisely that.
What a wonderful shot! Absolutely stunning.
And so to sudden death. Under gathering gloom, the pair slugged it out. But at the second hole, Cabrera's putt crept agonisingly wide, and Scott made him pay. The man who only last year threw away a chance to win the Open had seized the sweetest redemption, and the coveted green jacket now has another fitting winner. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
That's the green jacket. How much would you pay for the shirt on your back? Well, an Indian man has spent £160,000 for this one. It's made of solid gold. India is the world's largest market for gold, and as prices soar, people there have become obsessed with the precious metal. The shirt's owner says he isn't worried about security, as he's never without at least 30 of his relatives. That's a bit bling for every day, though. Let's have a look at the weather. John Hammond is here. Hello.
Nice shovel. Plenty of t-shirts this weekend, weren't there? It was so warm, very pleasant for some of us. For others, some blustery winds, and that's really the flavour of the weather. Over the next few days, it will be quite turbulent at times. Some rain, some sunshine. This blob of cloud out west is going to bring some wet weather over the next 24, 36 hours. But ahead of that, the cloud is quite well broken at the moment. So although there will be some showers, yes, many of us will get away with that fine afternoon with some pleasantly warm sunshine. Not just as warm as it was yesterday for some of us, but still I think the mid-teens for many feeling okay with the wind somewhat lighter than they have been. Still quite breezy across the north and the west, and that breeze will carry a few showers. So all in all, a reasonable afternoon to come for the vast majority of us. As we go into the evening, though, things do deteriorate. So I pointed out that blob of cloud on the satellite picture. It's going to produce a lot of rain eventually across Northern Ireland, and that rain spreading to many northern and western areas. The wind's increasing too, so a wet and windy end tonight here. Just dribs and drabs, though, reaching the more southern and eastern areas. A mild, frost-free night nationwide. But tomorrow does not look all that clever, with this area of low pressure just skimming up to the far northwest, the closeness of the isobar indicating a very windy spell, particularly across the north and the west. Those winds whistling through Northern Ireland, and through the day they'll be funneling through the central belt into the far north of England. Some heavy rain for northwest Highlands and Islands, the snow melting, so some concern about flooding across this corner of the world. Further south and east, okay, there will be blustery winds, but they won't be as strong, and actually there'll be plenty of dry and bright weather. We'll dregs of the overnight rain reaching the far southeast, but very little rain here, and that will tend to ease away, although we'll keep a fair bit of cloud across some southern areas. The best of the sunshine will be through this central slice of the UK. Further north, it stays very wet and windy, particularly across northwest of Scotland. Meteorological warnings are in force, so go online for details of those. In any sunshine actually through tomorrow, again it won't feel too bad with temperatures up to around 15 or 16 degrees, which actually is pretty good for the time of year. But this turbulent spell of weather continues. No sooner do we say goodbye to one area of low pressure, the next one comes spiralling in as we get into Wednesday. So another dose of wind and rain, again particularly for the more northern and western parts of the UK. That's of some concern, with the ground already saturated at this stage. Further south and east, again just a glancing blow, so not much in the way of rain. And with those southerly winds bringing up some warm air, so 16 or 17 degrees is quite possible. It turns cooler on Thursday, the wind's flicking around to a more of a westerly direction, still some very blustery showers across the north and the west, drier and brighter further south and east, and most of us, I think, by the end of the week, should become a little bit quieter.
John, thank you. John Hammond. Before we go, a reminder of our main story. A new cap on benefits begins in London, limiting payments to families and single parents. That's all from us now on BBC One. We join our news teams wherever you are. Goodbye for now.
Hundreds of seabirds are washed up, renewing calls for a change in the law to prevent the pollution thought to be responsible. Hello, good afternoon. We'll be live at one of the beaches where the birds are being washed up, and we'll have the latest on the rescue operation. Also this lunchtime, the deaths of a number of ponies on Bodmin.